This is a Mimi HQ video on why more context does not prevent architectural drift and why enforcement is required. Okay, so if your team has adopted AI-assisted development, you've definitely seen what's happening right now. The whole industry is kind of converging on larger context windows, right? Persistent memory layers, massive retrieval pipelines, the whole shebang. But, and I know you felt this, despite all those incredible technological advances, you're probably still dealing with duplicated abstractions, bypassed repository patterns, and just general code-based wandering. Well, in this explainer, we're unpacking exactly why that happens. And more importantly, what you should take away from this is how to actually stop it dead in its tracks.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the context engineering illusion, why architectural drift happens, why recall is absolutely not enforcement, the orchestration complexity trap, and finally, the missing governance layer.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the context engineering illusion.
Let's tackle the biggest myth in AI coding right now. The idea that just giving an LLM a massive context window solves absolutely everything. The narrative is basically, oh, just build a better retrieval system and your architecture problems will vanish. But the data tells a very different story. We are solving the wrong half of the problem. Now, don't get me wrong, we respect context engineering. It's a real breakthrough that solves the genuine problem of agent amnesia. It beautifully surfaces the correct info, it stops you from having to repeat instructions constantly, it gives historical awareness across long sessions, and it makes cross-agent coordination entirely tractable. It perfectly answers one specific question. Did the agent have access to the right information?
But here's the million-dollar question we really have to ask ourselves. If the AI has this perfect photographic memory, why are our PR review queues still growing faster than we can even manage? Why are agents constantly violating the exact policies that context retrieval was supposed to prevent? Well, it's because better recall simply does not guarantee architectural correctness. Knowing the rules and being forced to follow them, those are two completely different problems, and they require completely different infrastructure.
Which perfectly tees up Section 2, why architectural drift happens.
Let's break down how this inconsistent quality actually sneaks into our systems. Drift doesn't usually happen because the AI just forgot. It's a structural issue, driven by three distinct mechanisms of failure. First up, local optimization. Agents are basically wired to optimize for immediate task completion, passing the test, taking the absolute shortest path. So an agent with perfect context can still decide to just spin up a brand new HTTP client because it's locally faster for that specific task, completely ignoring your documented preferred pattern. Second, we have context dilution over time. In long-running sessions, noise and stale intent just accumulate. Context windows are accumulators, folks. They are not prioritization engines. And finally, delegation drift across handoffs. When one agent plans and another implements, architectural intent naturally fragments. The rules simply fail to travel with the workflow.
And that brings us to Section 3. Recall is not enforcement.
We absolutely have to separate the concept of having information from following the rules. This distinction is literally the key to mastering AI code generation at scale. Think of it this way. Context engineering like RAG is essentially a librarian. The librarian is super helpful. They hand you the exact right rulebook. But governance? Governance is the bouncer. The bouncer enforces those rules and stops violations right at the door. RAG only surfaces information, but hey, information is not a constraint. A retrieved architecture decision record can still be completely ignored, outweighed by a newer prompt, or just overwritten by that local optimization we talked about. The librarian cannot stop the agent. You need the bouncer to definitively say whether a violation is allowed to proceed. When we break these layers down side by side, it becomes glaringly obvious why RAG fails for architecture. Retrieval services info, sure, but it does not deterministically enforce a constraint. Just look at the failure mode for context engineering. It's simply that the agent didn't have the right information. But the failure mode for governance, the agent actually had the information but violated the constraint anyway, and verification fails when the output was never checked deterministically against that constraint. Relying on context alone just leaves architectural drift completely unaddressed.
All right, let's agitate this a bit more in Section 4, the orchestration complexity trap. What happens when we scale this up to agent swarms and autonomous remediation loops? Well, drift doesn't just grow linearly, it compounds exponentially into pure chaos. Every time you add a new autonomous agent or an asynchronous handoff, you're adding a brand new execution surface where your architectural constraints can just fail to propagate. Every single layer of orchestration adds distance between your initial architectural intent and the final codebase output.
And here is the harsh reality.
Human review queues literally cannot keep pace with agent velocity when governance is entirely absent from the loop. The agent had the context, it optimized locally, it deviated from the architecture, and boom, that drift went straight into your review queue for rework. And you can't just ask your engineers to review PRs faster. That's totally impossible. The only real answer is enforcement right at the point of generation.
Which leads us to our final piece, Section 5, the missing governance layer.
Since we've seen why the illusion of context fails, let's look at the structural answer to this compounding crisis. This is where NIME HQ comes in. NIME HQ defines architectural governance as turning mere documentation into rigid, executable, machine-enforced constraints. It sits perfectly right between orchestration and verification. It literally takes your architectural intent and makes it machine-evaluable. It enforces invariance at execution surfaces and validates outputs before they ever touch your codebase. It is, quite simply, architecture made executable. And NIME HQ provides this exact structural answer for AI-assisted development.
To operate at true scale, your infrastructure needs a few specific characteristics to guarantee that the same constraint yields the exact same verdict every single run. You need executable intent, decisions as code, not wiki pages. You need provenance-aware enforcement, so every single verdict traces perfectly back to its originating architectural decision. You absolutely need deterministic validation. And on top of that, governance propagation so constraints seamlessly travel with the workflow, backed by predefined verification contracts that run automatically.
Practically speaking, NIME HQ's governance layer integrates at very specific insertion points to intercept code before it ever mutates your repository. And the best part? You don't need a massive platform rewrite to do this. By compiling your architecture decision records into constraints, you just insert these gates right at the session start, right before a tool executes, before a commit, and finally as an architectural gate in your CI before a PR is merged. Identical, compiled constraints fanning out to every single agent and CI surface.
So as you evaluate your own AI infrastructure for scale, I want to leave you with this provocative question. Are you building a system with a photographic memory, or are you building a system with enforceable integrity? Because while context engineering is a great foundation, the next critical evolution in AI development is undeniably architectural governance. You definitely need the librarian, but you absolutely must have the bouncer.
NIME HQ, Architectural Governance for AI-Assisted Development, NIMEHQ.com.